All right, time to invent something else in the Omnia camp stove or Omnia camp oven. So today we're gonna grab some sliced pork belly, some broccolini, a sweet Vidalia onion, half a dozen eggs, bunch of mushrooms, some puff pastry, salt, pepper, some chives, some barbecue seasoning, a little maple syrup for pork. Come on. Backup plan: crescent, dough sheets, some cheese here, mozzarella and taco blend, and of course, the star of the show. All right, so pork belly is pre-cooked a little bit. Got some maple syrup in there as a nice glaze, and that's kind of reduced down. Gonna pull the pork belly off now, and we're going to come in with the onions and mushrooms and use all of the remaining liquid in here to give them a nice flavor as well in this experiment. And then, when you think the onions are, I don't know, partially cooked, I guess, in comes your mushrooms. A lot of mushrooms, at least for me. I like mushrooms. Keeping in mind that this is going to be in the Omnia, the camp stove for, I'm gonna say probably the better part of 40 to 45 minutes. We wanna make sure we get rid of all of this moisture from the mushrooms. So the mushrooms themselves don't need to be fully cooked at this point because they're gonna be in the camp oven for a while. So they'll do their final cooking in there. But just got to get rid of this moisture. And yeah, you can just pluck all of this out and get rid of the liquid if you like. Pro tip, there's a whole lot of flavor in that liquid, so you could use it other ways. But yeah, we'll see how this goes. And the pork belly has been kind of cut into thinner strips, a little easier to lay out inside the mold in the Omnia, and then it should bake up nicely. And the broccolini is par cooked, obviously, steamed down nicely, and it's wilted, a little bit softer, and that I will cut the bigger stalks into thinner pieces, and then that'll help it layer inside the mold. Almost ready to start assembly. Just want the mushrooms and onions to cool off a little more. The pork belly is ready. I've got all the broccolini is ready. And what the heck, right? A little olive oil in the pan. And, oh, look at that, 2.5 inches. That's how wide my pastry has to be. And we'll see if this is gonna work. It's a puff pastry. See how that turns out in the Omnia. I'm not doing a top and bottom. I'm only doing a bottom crust on this. And the top will just be essentially like a quiche, the egg mixture with cheese. So, I'm not going to be terribly artistic and fancy. However, I am keeping in mind that when we unmask this, what is currently the bottom layer is going to be the most visible portion of this. In my head, even though this thing is an entire invention, I see me flipping it the other way. So what will be our top for the purposes of assembly will be the bottom when we actually go to serve it up. So we'll see how this all pans out. And I think we can come in here with some of these and just get these guys layered in, but again, keeping an eye on that presentation for later. It always plans, even when you're just winging it with a recipe like this one, where I went to the grocery store this morning with the idea that I wanted to bake something in the Omnia, and the only thing I did was wander around and look at foodstuffs and think, oh, that'll be tasty. And then we ended up with this idea pulled together on the fly. So anytime you're kind of cooking this way, you have an infinite number of opportunities to change the playbook, if you will. And there's nothing saying that you need to use all of this that you prepared in the actual dish. I mean, it'd be handy, you know, everything would be used up and off we go. But obviously you don't want to overfill the Omnia. So I'm gonna start just pulling bits apart and sticking them into little crevices where I know I can stick them in. Maybe I got one more here. And we'll go on to the mushrooms. So there we go. Over here. And toss you in there. Now in theory, the mushrooms are ready to go. They have mushrooms are ready to go. They have cooled off a little bit. If there's any more liquid in there, that has kind of drained. So you'll see I'm just gonna kind of pull from the top here and just put in a layer. Now, my plan, I don't know if the universe is gonna support this, but my plan is that the egg will go on top of all of this and it will kind of seep down in all the crevices and fill up all of that. There is no way we're going to use all of this, but I kind of figured that. So, get this in, and then we will come back with eggs. And there's nothing exotic about this. You can go as crazy as you like, as you know, different spices, different ingredients. This, again, just walking around the store, picking up ideas, picking up things and saying, okay, this is what we're going with today. And there we go. So, okay, we're gonna call that done. And we're gonna give this a bit of a press in because this is pretty much at the limit that Omnia recommends for filling up one of the stoves. Now, let's see what our eggs do. One final whisk up here. So in here we've got salt, pepper. I did use a dash of maple syrup. We've got some organic milk. We've got chives. That's all of the green that you're seeing in here. We've got 6 eggs and a little bit of barbecue seasoning. So we'll see if that makes a difference. And now hopefully, oh, and I did add cheese here as well into this mix. So hopefully this is going to be a nice layer of cheese as the egg filters down in. And we'll see. That looks pretty damn full. So, all right. Well, the theme of today's product is obviously way too much, because this thing is full right to the rim, and I think that's going to be a problem as I cook it. Everything's going to rise a little bit, and it's going to cause some issues. But we will see. I am willing to do the experiment. In the end, I expect everything will be cooked and tasty AF, and I'm not really going to care about it until I have to do the cleanup. So we're going to give this a shot. Back shortly. Let's do this the right way. Okay, well, I know the dough is not complete, but I can tell you that inside is plenty warm. Everything will be cooked. The egg will be solid. We just got to wait for the crust to finish up here on the top. So after everything, we've got a hard crust on the bottom. We've got everything nicely browned off, and oh yeah, all kinds of nice layers in the middle. Now let's cut into this and see what we have inside. So, oh, that crunch on the bottom. Oh yeah. All right. Let's see what we have here. Oh yeah, we have the layers in here with the broccolini on here, the pork, the mushrooms, and then down below we've got the pastry. Oh yeah, I'm very much looking forward to this lunch. So I'll say this, this was an experiment. I would definitely do some things differently. It's delicious the way it is. However, I put too much of the flaky pastry dough on the top, which ultimately became the bottom. And it's not fully cooked in the center because I layered it too thick. If I were making this at camp, I would really cut everything by about half to ensure that the Omnia had lots of room to breathe, or get the taller body for the Omnia so that there's more room in there, more heat circulating and whatnot. Otherwise, look, I mean, you know, the flavors are there, the taste is there. It was a great experiment. I'll try it again in the future, but obviously with some improvements. All right, let's talk a little bit about what went wrong with this experiment. As I mentioned earlier, flavors are all fine, seasoning is all fine. You can see the caramelization on the top. As it sits right now, it's a little bit much. Part of that has to do with the sugars and the maple syrup that was used on the pork, and obviously it comes through, and when you get the right mix of temperatures, and I will admit, I suspect maybe I was a little bit high on the temp for a little bit too long on the stovetop. So you end up with this kind of burnt, not a burnt crust, but a caramelized crust on this. Tastes totally fine. It tastes like caramelized egg, so the flavor is good. Obviously everything is fully cooked. The mushrooms, the onions, you can see the pork in there, the broccolini, those are all fully cooked. They're just the way we would like them to be. Unfortunately, the dough that I used, which was puff pastry dough, is still raw in the middle. It's not fully cooked, and that was time and temperature. I never got the oven up to a temperature that would have fully cooked this puff pastry. It needed 400 degrees. It never got up above 325 or so, and even then, not for a long period of time. So, mistake there, I put the dough on way too thick. I just used everything I had, and I should have stopped with a single thin layer. That would have been more than enough to do what I wanted. When I pulled this out of the mold, you'll remember the dough was on the top. I actually put it in my oven here at home under the broiler for about 5 minutes, and that crisped up the top of the dough, obviously, but did nothing to cook the interior. So, this is completely doable as something at camp. Half a dozen eggs, whatever ingredients you want, basically. We're talking about a quiche with a crust. If I were to do it again, I would do thinner crust. I would cut the amount of fillers, everything, less broccolini, less pork, less mushrooms, less egg. Cut it all down to give room inside the Omnia oven for everything to rise. That said, other than the dough on this is a very tasty bake. So I'll do this again at some point, but in a different manner.